So let's talk about the history of energy healing as far as we know. Now, the true history of energy healing probably dates back long before we have the historical records, probably to Atlantean times and before that. But until we have some more definitive proof about Atlantean times and before that, we're going to have to go with what we know. And what we know is that energy healing has been practiced for a very long time, and most notably by the spiritual leaders of the ancient world. And we have many accounts of prolific spiritual leaders working incredible miracles and healing people of illnesses through the laying on of hands, through a subtle energy, which is often super mysterious, right? And of course, the most prolific of those already prolific spiritual leaders is probably Jesus Christ, aka Yeshua ben Joseph. So Jesus was one of also a sect of other adepts like him. John the Baptist was also a part of them, and they were called the Essenes. And the Essenes went through a number of spiritual practices to cleanse and prepare their energy body. And once they had elevated their vibration to a certain point, they were endowed with certain healing abilities. Now, our man Jesus took it to a very high level, all right? He was, according to the scriptures, healing people with lifelong injuries or disabilities in their ability to walk, their abilities to see. He was casting out demons. And I want to explore just one particular anecdote to kind of illustrate that this is a subtle energy thing which we are now connected to, okay? So if you ever remember the story, Jesus is walking through this crowd. Jesus was walking through crowds all the time, but in this particular day, he was, again, walking through a crowd. And lots of people were rubbing up against him, pushing into him probably. It was very crowded. His disciples were there. And all of a sudden, he stops everybody. He says, "Stop, who touched me?" And his disciples are like, "Dude, are you kidding? Everyone's touching you all the time. Like, what do you mean?" And he's like, No, you don't understand. Someone touched me and I felt the power go out. This is what he says. And he turns and looks and he finds this woman standing there, and she's clearly weeping, she's moved. And Jesus actually heals her without even realizing that he heals her, or not even trying to do it. She literally touches his cloak, and she's in such a state of faith that the energy transfers and she's healed of what she's suffering from. Now, there's one thing I want you to take away from this, and it's first, obviously, that there's energy healing going on, which, again, is a lineage that we're now connected to. But secondly, that elevating your vibration, doing these practices in and of itself will heal the people around you, even when you don't mean to do it, right? So there's a very interesting, subtle, and mysterious aspect to energy healing, and we see it play out in that story of Jesus. Okay, now there are many others, of course, beyond him and besides him that have also done some form of healing through the hands, healing through energy like we're doing in this course. But most notably, in recent times, we need to correlate this to the rise of Reiki. Most of you guys probably know what Reiki is. If not, it's a spiritual healing system developed by Mikao Usui a little more than 100 years ago in Japan. Now, the homie Mikao went up, he meditated for 21 days, fasting, prayer, all the usual stuff, and he received a transmission of divine energy. And he realized at a certain point that he could heal other people with his hands. And he began to go to the local villages, local towns, and to do this practice, which became later known as Reiki, which is channeling divine energy through the hands for healing purposes. Of course, since Mikao and all that happened, there's been a number of other of his disciples who've taken it and passed it down and modified it and created a codified system out of Reiki. Today, there's more than 1 million Reiki practitioners in the world. Super amazing. And I want to say before we go further that I have great respect for Reiki, and I love Reiki. I'm so glad that it's been so popularized. With that said, though, and here comes the kicker, Reiki is still in its infancy of understanding how energy healing really works. And Reiki, while being an amazing practice, has certain limitations, aka it's a system, it's a structure, and it basically takes you through a series of steps where you lay your hands in certain positions, and it's the same for every session, it's the same for every client. But let me ask you something. Every one of us is different, right? every one of us and what we're dealing with in our lives is different, right? So why would we treat everybody the same with the same hand positions, relatively the same timing? And to me, after my training, which I'll talk about in a moment, I've discovered that taking a unique approach to each client is important. That acknowledging the differences in the energy body of each client is important. And as you train and practice and study with me and on your own, you'll develop this understanding of how everyone is unique and needs to be handled a little differently. My system that I'm teaching you was both what I've learned in my own practice for the last 10 years, starting with my initiation at Mount Shasta, at Red Tent Therapies. Shout out to Abby, shout out to Jack, wherever you guys are. And I began working with the energies then, and so I'm going to be sharing a little bit of that, but since then I have changed, modified, and created my own system that I feel works really well. And my clients do too. So we are in a long line of energy healing that has been going on from time immemorial, passed down. The Reiki tradition continued that, and today we're continuing to grow and expand and to deepen our understanding of how energy healing works and what is actually going on when we're channeling these higher vibrational energies through ourselves and into other people for the purpose of healing. Whew. So that's a little brief background on the history behind energy healing in a very, very brief fashion. But I'm sure you're excited to get in and actually make this happen, to actually do the work and to see the results. So let's keep rolling.